Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of the Pet Behavior Chat. So we're continuing our theme of kitty cats this week. And today I want to talk about litter boxes because litter boxes are so important to our cat's behavioral health. Now, globally, if you asked veterinary behaviorists what their most common feline behavior problem was, they would tell you that it's urinating and defecating, but mainly urinating outside of the litter box. So it's a really common behavior problem in cats. And I know that it's a problem that really affects pet caregivers, cat caregivers a lot because of the hygiene and the smell. And, you know, for a lot of people, it means they can't invite people to come round again or to come over as much. And yeah, it's just an unpleasant thing to live with, to have cat urine and or feces outside of the litter box in the home. Now, it's a really complex topic, and I will kind of unpick it as we start to move through the podcasts, so also in future podcasts. But the one thing I want to focus on today is litter boxes. Now, litter box changes or litter box issues are not going to be the only factor in many of these cases. There are going to be a lot of other factors that contribute to urinating and or defecating outside of the litter box. However, a lot of the time we want to be optimizing litter boxes in the home in order to help with these problems. And sometimes optimizing litter boxes, finding the perfect litter box for the cat is all it takes to completely solve the behavior case, to solve the urinating or defecating outside of the litter box. And I've had a couple of those where, in inverted commas, all we did was change the litter box, change its location, change something about it that the cat was telling us that it wasn't happy with, and it completely cured and resolved the situation completely. So it's an important piece of the puzzle, and I just want to talk about litter boxes themselves today. Now, the title of this podcast is The Perfect Litter Box from Your Cat's Perspective. And I think that's really, really important because I think a lot of the time we place litter boxes in our homes to suit us, whether that's to suit our aesthetic, whether that's to suit the room that we have, whether that's to suit the room in the house where we think, the litter box should be or where we'd like it to be. It's often in a room that's maybe out of the way. That it could be a storage room or, an unused bathroom, could be quite a small room. And in some cases, that's fine. Having that sort of out of the way private space is in fact a good thing. But in other cases, those locations are maybe not what the cat, feels comfortable with, or where the cat feels comfortable urinating and defecating. So it's something that we really need to think about. And I think sometimes we also choose litter boxes according to what they look like, according to what's available commercially, what we can easily get hold of. And sometimes those litter boxes just simply aren't appropriate from our cat's perspective. So I'm going to chat you through 7 points that I think are really important to look out for when we're looking at litter box choices and choosing the optimal litter box for our cat. Before I start, though, I do want to kind of reiterate that litter box choices in cats, or litter box preferences, should I say, in cats, can sometimes be very, very individual. So it might be that, one cat prefers covered litter boxes and one cat prefers uncovered litter boxes. And sometimes it's possible that, even if you provide the cat with, the most inappropriate litter box, they'll still use it and you don't have a problem. So it is a little bit of an individual thing. However, there are some sort of overarching things I think that most cats prefer. And I've also based this on the literature. So there are 4 papers that I really love about litter boxes, and I'm going to put those papers in the show notes. And they've looked at different things. They've looked at the size. They've looked at covered versus uncovered. They've looked at urinating and defecating in separate litter boxes. So there is quite a bit of research out there, believe it or not, on the topic of litter boxes. But because it's such an important topic, and because it's something that as veterinary behaviorists we see a lot of. Okay, so here are my 7 points of consideration. And we are going to start with number 1, which is size. Now, and this is where we do have a really great paper. It's a paper from 2014, and it looked at sizes of litter boxes and sizes of litter boxes that were provided to cats in the home. And the conclusion of that paper was that most cats would prefer litter boxes that were larger than what was offered to them in the home. And that's the experience that I've also made with many of my cases, is that the litter boxes that we can commercially get hold of just simply aren't big enough. And if you think back to a cat's natural behavior, this very sort of elaborate dance they do as they get into position to either urinate or defecate, they'll often kind of circle a few times, they'll sniff different areas, and it will take them a moment until they've kind of found the perfect place or the perfect spot that they want to urinate or defecate in. And that can take, in some cases, quite a bit of space. So that's before the urination or defecation. And then afterwards, we have this, again, really elaborate covering ritual where the cat kind of covers, and it gets, covering material from quite far away. They stretch out their front legs and, they bring it in from the corners, and they make sure they really cover that area very, very well. And again, most commercially available litter boxes just simply don't provide that space and that size that most cats would like to have for their normal toileting behavior. As I mentioned, some cats just simply make do with what they have, and there isn't a problem there. But given the choice, I think many cats would prefer a larger box. So when we think about size of a litter box, we kind of roughly think about the litter box should be at least 1.5 times the length of the cat from the tip of the nose to the base of the tail. Now, the base of the tail is where the tail meets the body, so it's not the tip of the tail, but basically from the nose to where their body meets their tail. That length times 1.5 is what we would ideally like as the minimum size of our litter boxes in both length and width, to allow for that really sort of elaborate behavior before and after urination and defecation. And now the thing is, as I've mentioned a couple of times, we just simply can't get litter boxes that are that size. So I have looked for, a number of different areas where we can find, something that perhaps isn't a litter box per se, but there is a box that can be used. And we found some really great storage boxes that are shallow, that have a shallow lip, that are big enough. We've sometimes even resorted to kiddies' sand boxes, those large kind of sand boxes, especially if we've got a large area available, or, if that's something that we maybe want to put into a garden as a litter box for the cats in the garden, where we maybe don't have a lot of soil, where we've got a lot of, let's say, gravel or decking or pebbles or that sort of thing. So sometimes you can't rely on commercially available litter boxes, and you have to go out and you have to look for alternative sources. And yeah, that can sometimes take a little bit of creativity. We've actually found a really great source. And we always, in my clinic, we always have these large litter boxes available, and they have been such an absolute godsend for so many of my clients. And as I mentioned, those kind of big storage boxes used as litter boxes have sometimes been the thing that have completely resolved a case. So the size of the litter box is something that we really, really want to think about. And if you're not sure of your cat's behavior, before and after, if you're not sure, do they dig, do they cover, what kind of sort of rituals and dances do they do, then sometimes it can be really valuable to get a video of them, just to get a bit of an idea for the type of behavior that they perform before and after urinating and defecating, to try and understand, the amount of space that they would like to have or need to have. And then we also sometimes need to think about our really large breed cats. So, your Maine Coons, for example, some of our Arabian Mau cats here in the UAE are big cats. They're big, they're sturdy, they're solid, they have long limbs. And, so we need to also consider the size of the cat when we're thinking about the size of the litter box. So that's the first number one, size. And as I mentioned, we have some also evidence-based there. We've got a nice paper on that to confirm that. Number two is a number of litter boxes. How many litter boxes should you have? And we touched on this a little bit in episode 18 when we spoke about the 5 pillars of a healthy feline environment. We spoke about resources there a little bit. And the perfect number of litter boxes depends on the number of cats that you have in the home, obviously. And our kind of rough formula for that is number of cats in the home plus one. So if you have 2 cats, you should have at least 3 litter boxes. We then also have to take into consideration that some cats prefer to urinate and defecate in different locations. So that's a little bit what they would do in nature, out in the natural setting. They wouldn't urinate and defecate in the same place. So if you had 2 cats, you might even want to provide 4 litter boxes. So you've got 2 for urination and 2 for defecation. So 1 for each cat for both. And of course, this depends a little bit on the size of your home and, how much space you can allocate to the number of litter boxes. But that's something that's really, really important. And we spoke about not just the number, but also that we want them to be separated in the home. So I've walked into a lot of homes where, I've read on the questionnaire that we've got, I don't know, let's say 7 or 8 litter boxes, maybe for 6 cats. And I've thought, oh, great. And then I've actually gone into the home and all the litter boxes have been in the same room. They've all been perhaps in a downstairs toilet or a storage room, and they've all essentially been lined up next to each other. Now, that for me is one single litter box. That's not, a number of litter boxes. If you've got 3, 4 litter boxes lined up next to each other, that's not 3 or 4 litter boxes. That's one litter box. Because we're essentially also looking at the fact that they need to be separated. And the reason that we need to separate them, so put them in different locations around the home, is that the cats, especially if you have more than 1 cat in the household, is that they can easily access the litter boxes and that they perhaps don't need to cross paths with other cats or maybe dogs, or maybe, walk through a really noisy area of the room, or maybe walk past a children's playroom to be able to access the litter boxes. So number is really, really important. And also the fact that those numbers need to be separated from each other. So bear that number in mind, number of cats in the household plus 1. Sometimes we also talk about number of social groups in the household plus 1. So if you have 2 cats that are very strongly bonded to each other, they might be okay with using the same litter box. But I think to kind of err on the side of caution, I would always go with number of cats in the household plus 1 as your rough guide, as a minimum. You can always put in more litter boxes. So that's a little bit about number. Now, the next point is location. And part of that I've just sort of touched upon is making sure they're separated, making sure that we have litter boxes in different areas of the home. But we also want to think about what parts of the home would our cats be most comfortable eliminating in. Most cats prefer a quiet place and some privacy. So perhaps not, in a busy kind of throughway. I've seen litter boxes, in kind of hallways right opposite to the busiest room in the house. And that might not be inviting for many cats. I've also seen litter boxes, in the utility room next to the washing machine, next to the dryer. And that washing machine and that dryer can get quite noisy, and rattly when they're on. And then the cat might not choose to use that litter box, in there, either at the time that the washing machine and dryer are on, or indeed any other time, because they've kind of created this association that litter box isn't necessarily a safe or comfortable place to eliminate in, because, this noisy, rattly thing could occur at any time whilst they're in there. So choosing quiet places, choosing places that have enough space. Now, in my experience, most cats like to have a little bit of a 360-degree view of their surroundings when they're using the litter box. And that's because they're putting themselves into quite a vulnerable position when they're using the litter box. So having litter boxes that are kind of squashed into a corner might not be that attractive, because, again, that feeling of space, there's not a lot of space around it. And sometimes that can't be as attractive. As I mentioned earlier, each cats are individuals. So for some cats, maybe being in a corner where it feels quite safe could be okay. That's something that we have to kind of look at on an individual basis. And when I deal with elimination cases, when I'm kind of talking to clients who have cats that urinate or defecate outside of the box, we always look at the places where they then choose to eliminate. So, those inappropriate areas, whether that's on beds or, on bath mats or rugs or, different areas in the house, we're always looking at what is the cat telling us? What is that location telling us? What is the cat showing us in terms of their preference? Do they like an area that's more in the middle of the room, or do they like it in a room in the house that's quieter, that nobody usually goes in? The spare bedroom is always a bit of a classic here, urinating on the spare bed, for example. And that's often because that's the quietest room in the house. And oftentimes, just by putting a litter box into that room, we can start to solve those problems. Again, just want to caveat, it's a complex topic and something that, requires quite a bit of in-depth investigation, but absolutely can, be a good point to start just by looking at the litter boxes. Okay, so that's location. The next point, number 4, that we want to think about is the substrate, the litter itself. Do the cats have preferences? Did they develop a preference for litter box substrate, perhaps during their socialization period, which is from around 2 weeks to 9 weeks of age? I see this in a lot of cats out here in the UAE that were perhaps kittens during that socialization period, spent a lot of time outdoors in the sand. So is sand a substrate for them that they perhaps prefer than maybe a crystal litter? So what are the substrates that they prefer? But on the whole, we're looking at a kind of fine material substrate. So oftentimes, those crystals can be a little bit too coarse for some cats. Sometimes that's uncomfortable on their paws, especially if they're digging and covering. So oftentimes fine litter, a sandy type, or, that are very sort of small pebbles might be more comfortable for many cats. We also want to use litter that doesn't smell particularly strong. So a non-scented litter is often many cats' preferences. And I know we can get litters in many different scents, whether that's lavender or lemon or cotton candy or whatever they all might be. And again, I think we often choose those litters from our perspective because we would prefer to have a different kind of odor in the litter box. And that might not be your cat's preference. So many cats really struggle with strong smells. Strong smells can be quite aversive to them, especially if they're sort of citrus smells. And a scented litter might be enough to put them off. So we want to use a neutral, non-scented litter that's relatively fine. And we want to put probably about 2 to 3 inches worth of litter in the litter box. I think that's a good start. Now, in terms of deodorizers and liners and things like that for the litter box, that is actually my next point number 5. So should we be using deodorizers? Should we be using litter box liners, any sort of other things in the litter box? And the answer to that is probably no. So there is one study that was done on a special deodorizer that was kind of an odor neutralizer. And that did show that cats preferred the boxes where they had used that odor neutralizer. I'd be careful with that. So I think that study was actually funded by the company that made that particular odor neutralizer. And I think it's very difficult to distinguish between odor neutralizers and scented litters or deodorizers or things that you put into the litter to give the litter a better smell for exactly the reasons that I've just spoken about, that smells can be quite aversive. And so I would be careful. There are great litters in the market that are, that don't smell at all bad and that actually capture the smell and, that really smell quite neutral and inoffensive. So those are the ones I'd be looking for rather than anything that is scented or with a scented deodorizer or using on top of the litter a scented deodorizer or a deodorizer, something like that. So that's as far as deodorizers and scented litters go. And then litter liners. So they're often plastic bags that can go into the litter box before you put the litter in. And obviously the idea of that is to make it very easy to then just kind of scoop up the plastic bag and empty the entire litter box of its contents, and then just put another litter bag down and fill it up again. So I don't particularly like these for a number of reasons. I think the cats can get, as they're doing their digging and covering, they can get their nails caught in the plastic liner that's underneath, and that can be aversive for them. And, that can be quite unpleasant to sort of get their nails caught on there. But the other reason I don't like them is because I think they encourage letting the kind of the soiled litter build up in the litter box until the person cleaning the litter box kind of goes in and takes the entire bag out. I think it's far more hygienic to actually scoop on a daily basis to keep the litter box clean and to not let soiled litter build up and then just take it all out in one fell swoop. So I think it encourages bad litter box hygiene, having those litter box liners in there. And I think sometimes it causes people perhaps to not scoop as frequently. So those are the two reasons I'm not in favor of litter box liners, and I would not encourage them. Which brings me quite neatly onto my it's not my final point. It's my penultimate point, which is cleanliness of litter boxes. So obviously that's another big area, and they're having very dirty or very soiled litter boxes can be quite aversive to many cats. So scooping on a daily basis, getting kind of the big bits out, and it helps having a clumping litter that you can easily scoop out. So scooping on a daily basis, and sometimes even a couple of times a day, really promotes that good litter box hygiene and cleanliness. And then I would remove all of the contents of the litter box about once a week. And then I would wash the litter box with hot water. Again, be careful with soaps and detergents that are strongly scented for the reasons we spoke about. Cats often don't like strong smells. So use hot water, use a very kind of mild, unfragranced detergent if you can. Do that once a week, and fill it with completely new and fresh litter. And then I would potentially replace litter boxes maybe once a year. And that's because sometimes the plastic can get scratched or scalded from urine. Sometimes we can get sort of, just the soiling can cause the litter boxes to just get a little bit stained, and sometimes can penetrate into the plastic especially. So think about replacing litter boxes annually, of course, only if you can replace them with something appropriate, and if you can replace it with the same size and the same type of litter box that you've been using and that your cat's been accustomed to. So cleanliness is a big piece. On the point of cleanliness, I'm just going to quickly talk about what should you do if your cat has urinated or defecated outside of the litter box in terms of cleaning. And the answer to that is we have to use an enzymatic-based cleaner to try and get rid of the urine odor. Bleach and vinegar are usually not particularly helpful and can sometimes actually make the situation worse. So we want an enzymatic and enzyme-based cleaner. And there are a number on the market that are really good and that are made specifically for canine and feline sort of urine and fecal marks. Urine Away is a really good one, and Urine Off. So those two are brands that I like, trust, and have used a lot in the past. So making sure that, we use an enzymatic cleaner there. Sometimes if the urinating or defecating outside the box has been going on for a long, long time, especially the urinating, and if we have, let's say, soiled mattresses or soiled carpets, then we may recommend completely replacing that. So taking that up and replacing it, because it can be very difficult to get the smell out from deep in those soft furnishings. And that is going to act as a bit of an attractant to the cats to go back to that same same spot. So that's my penultimate point about cleanliness. And then my final point is the big question: covered versus uncovered. And this is an interesting one. So there's a lot of sort of, I guess, clinical-based experience to suggest that many cats prefer open and uncovered boxes. And that's definitely what I would normally recommend. I would recommend an uncovered box, an open box. However, there are individuals that will prefer a covered box, that will prefer that kind of privacy and will prefer the safety that the covered litter box provides. And in one of the papers that looked at covered versus uncovered boxes, they actually found a relatively even split of preferences between covered and uncovered. And I guess my recommendation here would be looking at the individual animal and what the individual tells you that they prefer. We've actually had a couple of cases in the veterinary clinic, where we've had cats that have had quite big procedures, big surgeries done, and then after their procedure, they did not use the litter box, they didn't urinate, they didn't defecate. And it wasn't until we spoke to the owners who said, oh, they normally have a covered litter box at home, and we provided them with a covered litter box, that they then immediately used that litter box and urinated and defecated, I think, for those cases. And they're kind of, those standout cases that just make you think, we really need to be looking at what the individual cat is telling us and, what their individual preferences are. And that's actually a really also good takeaway message for any veterinary teams that might be listening, to get that information before or on admission. Ask the client, what kind of litter box does your cat have at home? Do they use a covered or an uncovered litter box? And then try and provide them with that also in the hospital setting. That can always make or can often make a big difference, between them toileting or not toileting in the hospital setting. So those are my 7 points, things to think about in terms of the perfect litter box from your cat's perspective. It's really important that we look at it from the cat's perspective. And again, I just want to reiterate that these cases of outside of the litter box elimination, whether that's urination and or defecation, they can be really complex to work up. They oftentimes need the support of a veterinarian who has a special interest in behavior. We often need to do a medical workup, a physical medical workup as well, to exclude any systemic disease, whether that's pain or whether that's urinary tract problems or whether that's systemic issues such as diabetes or kidney disease that can cause cats to drink more and therefore urinate more. Those things are important to look at as well. Pain, I just mentioned, that's another important one. Sometimes cats are too painful to access the litter boxes, or again, the litter boxes aren't big enough for them. If they're a little bit arthritic and they want to put themselves into that optimal position to be comfortable as they're eliminating. So pain is another really important one to consider. So these cases can be complex. They often need the support of a veterinarian and or a behaviorist, a veterinary behaviorist, whatever it might be. And there's a lot more to delve into than just changing litter boxes. However, as I've mentioned, in some cases, the changing of the litter box and the optimizing of the litter box situation alone can resolve the problem and can resolve the case. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to put some of the paper references that I mentioned in the episode in the show notes. So if you're interested in reading any of those papers and studies, please do. If you want to geek out on litter boxes more, just like me, then go ahead and do so. And yeah, that's it for today. And I look forward to seeing you all in our next episode. So bye-bye for now.